It's Ms. D again. I'm here for, hi guys. This is Ms. D again. We're here to talk a little bit more about safety, and we're going to start again with some fume sources. So, this is really important to understand. There are some fumes that are toxic, and you don't want to breathe them. Before cutting or welding on metal, you want to make sure that there's no paint, grease, oil, or cleaning chemicals on the material. Be sure that you grind off any coatings like galvanization. And remember, you can get poisoned. You can have diarrhea, vomiting within minutes of inhalation. Stainless steel should be well ventilated as well because of the chrome in it can cause metal fume fever. So we want to make sure that we have extreme care when we get in fumes, and we want to make sure to avoid them as much as possible. When we weld or cut, we don't want to do this on any drums, barrels, tanks, or vessels, or other containers that have any or that have had any flammable materials like solvents or oils or what have you. Once we close them up and try to weld on them, they can blow up from the vapors, or they can even overcome the welder. So let's just kind of avoid the situation. Ventilation. When we weld, the welding area should be well ventilated. Ventilation is essential when welding. Natural ventilation is best, but sometimes we need other means to help remove the fumes. Forced ventilation. So what it is kind of like a little exhaust. It kind of sucks up all of the fumes when we put it by our welding table. So here is a little flexible exhaust pickup, and then we'll put it somewhere else where it's being filtered. Material safety data sheets, MSDSs. They're now called SDS or safety data sheets as well. Manufacturers must provide an MSDS to inform consumers of the product of potential hazards of the product. Okay. MSDS also tells the user if an injury should happen, how to treat it. All right, let's onward. Cylinders. Oxygen and gas cylinders have the potential to explode or combust if not stored correctly. Oxygen and fuel gas cylinders or other flammable gases should be stored separately. Meaning the storage must be separated by a 20-foot wall or by a wall that is 5 foot high and has a burn rating of a half hour. Means we need to keep them apart. We want to keep them separate so they don't fuel the fire even more. We want to keep cylinders stored vertically and have the protective cylinder cap screwed on. All right, so a special area should be made with full or empty cylinders. A cylinder valve protection cap, it protects the delicate cylinder valve, that part that we turn on and off. Cylinders are under pressure, and a broken cylinder valve can be like a missile in the shop. Okay, so we don't want to store or move any cylinder without a cylinder cap. Cylinders should be chained to keep them from falling over or being knocked over accidentally. When we store cylinders, we want to keep them away from heat, radiators, and welding sparks. Acetylene is a type of fuel gas, and this can lead to explosive fires. All right, so there are also different types of warning signs that we need to make sure that are around our cylinders. Okay, some of them saying flammable gas, things like that. Pretty important. All right, cylinder precautions. Well, guys, we're in California, so usually cylinders don't freeze to the ground, but should that happen and you're welding out in South Dakota or somewhere with freezing temperatures, use warm water and you can loosen them from the ground because we don't want to pull them off because we can actually damage the actual cylinder. A cylinder that has a leak or has a damage to the valve, it should be reported immediately to the supplier. If a cylinder valve is leaking and it can't be closed or stopped, The cylinder should be put in an open area so it can release the pressure without hurting anybody. Now, acetylene. In order to put acetylene into cylinders, it's absorbed into acetone and a type of porous material, okay? Acetylene that's been on its side any length of time should stand for a minimum of 4 hours. This allows for the liquid to settle back away from the cylinder valves. So if you use acetylene too soon, it could drop out the acetone, and this can damage your torch valve or the settings and do some really, really fun damage. So we don't want to even work with that. Maximum working pressure of acetylene is 15 psi. Acetylene becomes unstable after 15 psi and can explode. Fire, 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 fire protection. Well, this is a really, really big deal because fire is everywhere when we're welding. Combustible materials should be no closer than 35 feet when we want to weld. Be sure to clear the area of combustible materials like gases, books, papers, bags, and other materials that can catch on fire. Fire extinguishers. Well, fire watch. Well, fire watch is anyone who's watching for fire when combustible materials cannot be removed. This is common when welding in a refinery or a closed space. When welding at home, you should be careful as well. Sparks and pieces of slag can pop and bounce up to 30 feet. When welding in the garage, take care to notice any boxes that are stored, cobwebs, dust bunnies, or even the hot water heater. These areas should be watched for about 30 minutes after welding to make sure there are no sparks or hot metal that's igniting anything. Ooh, more fire! Fire extinguishers. The 4 types of fire extinguishers are Type A, Type B, Type C, Type D, and Type K. So let me tell you what they're about. Type A is for wood and paper and combustible solid materials. Type B is for flammable gas or liquid like acetone or gas. Type C is for electrical fire. Type D is metallic fire like titanium, magnesium, or sodium. Type K is for cooking fires like animal or vegetable and fats. So we want to make sure that your equipment is properly maintained and use the correct fire extinguisher for what you need. We also want to make sure that fire extinguishers are in the welding and cutting area. So there should be signs that mark where they are so we can have some things like this, but we also need to make sure that there's red paint or like the little areas that are actually sitting on their own so that people know what this is. Now, when we use a fire extinguisher, we want to use it in a proper way. So when we use a foam fire extinguisher, we want to be sure to allow the foam to fall lightly at the base of the fire. When using a carbon dioxide fire extinguisher, we want to be sure to direct the extinguisher at the base of all the flames, close to the fire as possible. The first edge should be started and the flames and gradually to the center. A dry chemical extinguisher should be used at the base of the flames and materials, and in some cases, 2 different types of extinguishers may have to be used. All right, equipment and maintenance. Well, if there are leaks, bad grounds, frayed, burned, missing, melted insulation, it can cause potential problems such as fire or even electrocution. Hoses. Get your hoses. Everybody need a hose. Hose, hose, hose. Well, we want to make sure that we have proper hoses. Use the hose for what it was designed for. You're not going to use a garden hose to carry gas, are you? No. The proper hose for gas should be used. Gas hoses are impermeable, meaning the gas cannot go through the hose. We never want to use oil, grease, or other compounds on hoses or near sparks, as they can catch on fire and be combustible really badly, okay? A leaking or broken hose should be properly repaired. Tape is not a proper repair and cause serious damage because tape will allow gases to leak. Ooh, this is my favorite. Cleaning up. Make sure your area is clean. Make sure you clean up. Electrode stubs can be slipped and tripped on. Be sure to put your used stubs in a container and throw them out at the end of the day. Grinding dust and slag on the floor can also be slipped on. Be sure to sweep where you grind and weld. Cleaning and putting away your materials is an essential part of the welder's job, so get into the habit and organize your workstation. Here it is. The 3 leading causes of work-related injuries in the emergency room were contact with objects and equipment, overexertion, and fall, slips, and trips. No one wants to work with someone who is sloppy and cannot clean up. Onward. Hand tools. Welders use many different hand tools. Be sure to maintain them. Use the correct tool for the job and do not try to force a tool to do a job that it's not designed for. Keep your tools clean to avoid corrosion and issues with them. If you do not know how to use a particular tool or equipment, please ask. Okay? All right, make sure your hand tools are maintained. Be sure to check for frayed cords or worn out blades or grinding discs. Hammer safety. Hammer, hammer, hammer. All right, so be sure the handle and head are secure before using. Don't use a damaged head on the hammer. Make sure you use the correct hammer for the job. So, hammer blow should be struck as squarely as possible. We don't want to go off one side or the other. You want to be right in the middle. When you want to hit another tool, be sure to hit the head of the hammer. And the head of the hammer is proportionally larger than what you're trying to hit. Do not use one hammer to hit another one because it needs to fit in somewhere. This can chip and break both the hammers. Okay? And you also don't want to use the hammer for other things than it was intended because, of course, it just might split open. Electrical safety. Well, everybody uses electricity, but we need to remember that welding uses high power electricity. This is not to be taken lightly. We need to take serious precautions when we use electrical equipment. We want to make sure that you're using a ground. Your welding machine must be grounded to avoid electrocution. This does not mean that the ground to work. We're talking explicitly about powering the machine itself. Many hand tools will have a third prong on them, and this is to ground the tool. So if we look right here, this is a ground. This is a ground. Okay, we want to make sure that we have grounds. Welding cables should not be sliced within 10 foot of the machine. A splice means to put shorter cables together to make a longer one. The cables you use should also be rated for the particular current levels you're going to use. Voltage. We want to make sure and look at the power source to make sure that the voltage rating is correct. Using a power source with incorrect voltage can damage or burn out the motor. Extension cords. Everybody uses them. We want to make sure that we're using the correct amperage rating for the cord. So, if we see this extension cord chart, so we want to remember that you can lose power with extension cords that are really, really long. Okay, it's called voltage drop. It's kind of like a garden hose that you only turn on a little bit, and then when you get to the end, it's only a small trickle. So we need to make sure that you use the correct extension cord with the correct size for the current. All right, kind of common knowledge, but let's go over this. We want to make sure that we follow all safety precautions before we use a tool. If you don't know how to use it, please get instruction. Also, know what the tool can and cannot do. We want to make sure that the tool is properly grounded according to the manufacturer. So, be in a well-lit area when you're working with your tool. Avoid dunking your tool in water and or acid. Does not really work well. Okay? Make sure that your grinding or sparking of a tool is not in the presence of something that has flammable vapors or could cause fire or explosions. Like I said, kind of self-explanatory here. So when grinding, avoid grinding toward any type of cylinder regardless of the contents, and definitely avoid acetylene, gas, propane, etc. so we don't, ba-boom! All right, be sure to use the right tool for the job. Do not try to make something do what it was not designed for, okay? Also, if you're going to do something stupid, wear safety glasses. A respirator can also help us out, so we might want to be using one of those too. All right, so take care of your tools, okay? Take care of your cords. Make sure there's no nicks, cuts, burns, but not only that, it can not only spark, but it can electrocute yourself. So be sure not to carry your tool by the cord unless directed by the manufacturer. Carry tools by the cord can cause wiring to degrade, okay? Other things, we want to make sure that we use a clamp or a work vise when we're working with tools like grinders. So we're going to put our weldment into a vise. So because it's safer than holding something and trying to work the tool with one hand. We want to make sure not to overreach. Do not try to overextend yourself and put yourself off balance. Make sure you disconnect the tools from the power source. Have a habit of making sure that there are no tools lying around your work area, especially near drills and drill presses. A small tool can catch and go spinning off or hitting you or somebody else. Whew, this is a great idea. Do not carry a plugged-in tool with your finger on the power switch, and make sure the switch is off before unplugging it. Do not use the tool if there are any damages to the housing or the outside of it. Power tools. Power tools. Check your owner and manufacturer for these tools. Kind of important, right? All right, onward. Grinders. We love grinders. There are different types of grinders, okay? There are portable, pedestal, and bench. So these ones are portable. This would be like an angle grinder. This is a pedestal grinder, and this is a bench. These two are not very portable. Okay, so a bench grinder or pedestal grinder uses a grinding stone. Okay, grinding stones are made for different types of materials. We want to make sure that we're using the correct grinding stone or grinding disc on a machine. We don't want a machine with a higher RPM rating. Okay, we need it to match the stone or the disc, otherwise it can actually explode. Okay, we also want to make sure that there are no cracks. Okay, and when we use a grinder, leave it face up to avoid going off when plugging it in. So let me tell you, I knew a kid. He was working at a shop, and they had a very large 8-inch grinder, and apparently there was something going on with it. So the day before, I guess somebody was using it, left it in its on position because it jammed, and unplugged it. And they put the tool face down with the grinding disc on the table, and he didn't know that it was having a problem. He plugged it in, and it started to jump off the table, and he tried to catch it, and it sliced his arm open to the point where he actually had to have surgery. This is really important, guys. We always want to keep our grinders face up so that if it is plugged in and it was stuck on, that it doesn't come shooting at you. Okay, okay, drills. Before you drill, make sure you secure your workpiece, whether you're using a hand drill or a larger drill. Okay. We can also use a punch. We can make a little hole and punch it before we're trying to drill it. It helps from the drill bit, kind of like from moving across the surface while we're trying to drill. All right, so make sure you also give enough pressure, but not too much to stop the drill. Drilling oil can also be used to make sure that the drill does not cease or break. If the drill stops for any reason, take your finger off the trigger and slowly remove the jammed area. Sometimes you might have to do a little reversing. Make sure you reduce the pressure on the drill just before it goes through the metal so we can avoid stalling the tool in the metal. Metal cutting machines, these are some of my favorite. So there are different types of mechanical cutting machines in the welding shop, and shears and punches are probably the most common. Some are operated with a foot pedal and others hydraulics or hand operated. Either way, you need to follow safety guidelines to avoid cutting your fingers off or anything else. Okay, so cutting machines. Cut-off machines use a pivot point to cut. Others, like a horizontal bandsaw or a vertical bandsaw, just cut the material. So we want to use the proper blade for the type of material and make sure the settings are for that material. Sometimes going faster does not produce the best cut. Okay, so if you're operating any equipment, make sure you know how to use it and make sure that you're safe when you do it. If not, you need to have somebody show it to you. All right, so when we move stuff, you need to make sure that you lift properly. If something is too heavy, have someone assist you. If it's really hefty, then you may need to use, a lifting, thingamajigger, hoist or cranes, okay? So we need to make sure that we're doing something to help ourselves without injuring ourselves. Ladder safety. Well, make sure you follow recommended practices from the manufacturer, like the proper maximum weight limit. You may not exceed the limit, but the material you are moving, plus you, could be heavier than the rating. Okay? Make sure the ladder's on a level and solid surface. Okay? We also want to make sure not to use a ladder in a wet or muddy area because it makes the rungs slippery and you could fall. We also want to make sure that we don't use a metal ladder when we're trying to use something electrically alive, as you can get shocked. Tie your ladder in place. We also want to make sure that you take your time going up and down a ladder. You don't have to be quick on a ladder. Try not to carry tools in your hands. Should something happen, you may not be able to grab the ladder with your hands because they're full. So we don't want to fall. So lower your tools down with the rope or bucket first and then come down. Do not use a ladder next to live wires. I'm sure we've all seen the videos for that, so I think that's a little explanatory. So we also want to make sure that you wear shoes that fit. Don't be doing this in flip-flops, okay? When we have shoes that don't fit well, you're likely to have problems and you can slip or fall off the ladder. We also want to make sure the ladder is tall enough for the job. Yep, that's me right there. If the ladder's too short, you might have to reach or stand on the top step, which, of course, you can lead to falling off the ladder. Remember, most people who die from falling off the ladder seldom fall from a height more than their own. In summary, we have a summary. Overall, safety is really super important. If an accident occurs, follow first aid guidelines. We want to make sure that your equipment is working correctly and safe. If you're not sure about certain safety items, you can always check out ANSI Z87.1 for eye protection, as well as OSHA and AWS and their safety guidelines. Thank you guys, and as always, weld the world.
Weld the world.